All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday TLDCast. Thank you for coming in. Hopefully, this will be a great way to end your work week. Happy summer to you. Hope you guys are enjoying the summer. I am so excited and grateful that today we've got a wonderful guest to talk about favorite books in L&D. This is Zsolt Olah. I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're on social media, know who Zsolt is, or if you regularly go to conferences, you've probably maybe seen him speak. I've been following him for quite a while, and he is a great person to add to your social media regulars. Just a fantastic follow. He's always got excellent stuff to offer on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And so, Zsolt, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for joining, and happy Friday, everyone. I hope that it's not your Friday that you actually have something to do and you're blowing up your work, but I'm happy to be on the show and talk a little bit about books and everything else that comes with it, and hopefully you get something out of it by the end of the day.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this earlier in the green room, Zsolt, but this morning I happened to see this article on Lifehacker that offered like this. It was a calculator that could calculate how many books you could read if you got off social media, if you stopped using social media, the number of books that you could possibly read. I don't use social media that much. I probably spend way too much time on YouTube, especially in the evenings. I just get stuck watching comedians and stuff. But I would say that I'm sort of a light social media user. It ended up that when I did the calculation, I could read up to 136 books a year, just even with my light usage. And so I thought that would be pretty kind of relevant for this particular conversation, because you had so many books listed in your recommendation list that you did through e-learning industry, and I'm gonna post that list right now.
So while you're doing that, I think it's also kind of like a theoretical problem, because if you calculate how many ice creams could you eat in that time frame, you would end up with a lot of ice cream too. So it's like you would really want to spend your time is reading books all the way through. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, it's theory, it works.
It makes a good point, though. It makes a good point. I know for myself, even I feel guilty about the amount of time that I spend on social media that I should be actually, reading your book or somebody else's. But yeah, no, I got it.
So while you're bringing up that list, for me, I think this conversation should be about what people can get out of this, or at least maybe one book that you haven't read and you want to take a look at and read it. It's 2019. I never knew that in 2019 people were whether they're going to read books or not. But last year when I did my ATD Technology Conference, I had my session on advanced storyline and JavaScript and all that. So I built this site, and it has over now 50-something JavaScript examples. And it starts out as a book, because originally we wanted to write a book. And after the session, many instructional designers came over and asked where they can buy the book. So I had to explain that this is not a book. It doesn't exist. It's looked like a book. It's online, but it's all live. So we can add things and remove. A book is printed and it's done. It's like dead at that point. You put it out there, and unless you do revisions, it's gone. It's just snapshot. So I was surprised that in 2019 people still want to read actually physical books about learning and an industry. So the reason I did this article last year is just I took the last page of my book and put it out there for people if you want to read it. It's I read over 100 books over a time of 3 months. And I know that I know I said that I'm a bookworm, and it's not really true in the sense of I read all the time. It was triggered by this weird feeling that I should read a lot before I write. So I thought that I could write a book in 3 months. So I started reading books first, and this kind of the result of that. Once you start reading a book, it opens up a new book, and then it's like a chain reaction. It's a rabbit hole, because they keep referencing each other.
I got to ask you this: 100 books. Wait, did you say 100 books over 3 months?
That was around, yeah, the time frame.
So, how much time a day do you think that you actually spent reading?
There was a lot of night and weekend because actually I have full-time work.
Yeah, yeah,
But also it's I think for me reading a book, some of these books are different than others. So some book you sit down, read it end to end, and you get something out of it. Some books are so technical and oriented that you cannot read and then memorize. You just use back and forth. You always go back and forth, and when you need it, you bring it up. Others are completely, and you see that on the list, completely not L&D books.
yeah.
It's just how my mind worked that I found it interesting, and then I had to read about it. So,
Wow, wow, amazing. Okay.
but I never read any books ever since. So I think I kind of overread myself at that point.
You got burnt out from reading books.
Yeah.
That's understandable. All right, amazing. All right, so maybe let's talk about some of these books that you read. I mean, is this list that we have here and that I'm sharing on the screen, are they in any particular order, or are they the ones that like the top ones, the ones that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah. So in the book, in my book, actually the end 2 pages are the list, but in my book it's alphabetical. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to rank anyone, so I just put them into alphabetical order. But then I realized that if I make an article, I create an article and share this, alphabetical order might not be the best way to find things.
Yeah.
So I put them into categories, depending on what you're interested in, learning, the design part, the brain, or just the random crazy things that I read. Then you can just go straight into this category and look at things. So I suggest to just go through some of these, probably spend more time in the learning and doing business part.
Yeah.
And I can tell you a little bit about the book and why I got into it, and who that would be a good target if you haven't read it yet. But I do want a little bit of a game here. Since I have a book here, if you have not bought my book, which are many people out there have not yet, I offer this one. And it's going to be a little competition in the chat. Question is going to be actually 3 letters. So whoever first put the right 3 letters, not just any 3 letters, the right 3 letters of a musical group that I'm thinking of, gonna actually wins this book. Now you'll get some clues as we talk around this. Now another rule is that if you once submitted something, you can still submit, so you're fine. But we'll see how far it goes. So again, it's a 3-letter musical group, and then we'll get to that in a little bit. So if you look at the group, first, the learning part was most of the books that I read. I didn't post all of the books in that list because you probably don't want to read 100 books like I did. But these are the just that was most essential, I think, writing or learning. And if you think about your life cycle and then where you are right now in learning and development, some people start out and learn about the basics. Some people have done a lot and want to improve. You might want to move into like consulting type of things. So there's all kinds of lists there. And a lot of people, I think, in our industry just lends into the instructional design role. And so this is why Cammy's Accidental Instructional Designer is there. That book, it's not old. I'm working with Cammy and at Kineo. So she's not old. She's still young, but the book is getting, as she's saying, getting old, but still resonate with a lot of people who got into this business by accident, by coming as a trainer or a subject matter, and suddenly that person needs to create training, and started picking out the practicality part. So, okay, I don't really need the 5-year PhD on science. I just need to know what works today, what are the models, and how can I design practically little things that I need to use daily. And so the Accidental Instructional Designer is a great book for that. And she's a really good writer, a fun person to work with, and you see that in the book too. So she doesn't take it so seriously as maybe some people would, that this is their profession and they're always right. You can make a lot of mistakes in this field.
Yeah, Cami is an exceptional person. She's so fun to talk to, and it seems like that book would probably be like in the top 10 of a lot of like L&D pros, people that have read it. That one seems to be really, really popular. I'm not sure if anybody else in chat has picked that one up or has read that one. You guys definitely should if you haven't. And Cami is amazing.
Yeah, so don't call her Carolyn. She's not going to react to that name. Just call her Cami.
Yeah.
But
Wait,
that's the
is
official.
Carolyn her real name? I was looking at that. I'm like, okay.
Yep,
Wow.
it is how it's posted. I got this from the original source, so I was like, okay, if that's the book, I put her name, but it's Cami Cami Bean.
Okay.
So again, if you're into the theory and all the models and all that, that is not a book for you. But if you want to jump in, learn about from the industry, that's a great one. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the actual instructional design focus, Make It Stick is, I think, something that everybody should read. This is a very interesting book about really focusing on how the mind works and translating into how you actually design things that make it stick. So it's about how you design learning that you will remember, and all the little things in it. It's a great book. I think it's an essential for everyone who wants to design any type of learning, or even presentations. That's a great exercise over there. Excellent. I don't know if you read that, but this is probably one of the basics one that I had to go through and buy.
Yeah, no, I haven't read that one. I've definitely heard of it. And if anybody in chat, if you guys have read any of these books, feel free to like offer feedback as well. Would love to hear it.
So the next part I think that I would definitely suggest is, and a little bit different, is Benedict Carey's book, which I didn't know before. It says Surprising Truths About When, Where, and How It Happened. Now, this title won't tell you what this book is about, so I'm not sure if it's the best title. I got to this book because I started reading previous books, and it kept coming up. This is about how the brain operates, and lots of examples of how we think something operates in the brain and it does not, and go into the psychology of things. I think this is one of the most amazing or more surprising books I've read out of the 100. It's not L&D book. It's not about just learning, but I get so much out of it, and so interesting examples that it actually opened up another 10 books after that, as he was quoting examples. Wow. So I definitely want you to read that and try that. And again, like it's an interesting title for what it is. It's much better than the title, I'll tell you that.
All right, I'm trying to mark these so that I can push them out later, just the ones that you're sort of highlighting.
Yep. And then for those who just started instructional design, or now you have the basics, but you want to know the end-to-end process and how to apply that, what are the models out there, but less about the theory, more about the day-to-day. I think Julie's book, Design for How People Learn, it is a great book. She's very good at taking the theory, the models, and translate that into everyday thing, including examples of why and how to do things. Her style is really like no nonsense, practical, not getting into tangents of all kinds of things, but very focused. And I think it's one of the most practical books on the list.
Excellent.
Plus, she's a good person too. I mean, I don't know if I see anybody who's not a good person, but I definitely know that she's a good person to talk to. There's a couple of things here that you may or may not want to look into. It's more like organization skills, like using the science to build learning and that type of thing. But definitely there's one that I want to call out, and it's Kathy Moore. Kathy Moore has been, I think, my idol out there for a long, long time. Most of the books that you see there and you generally read about L&D is going from the content, from the design perspective, for the models, for everything that you learn about doing design. Cat is about doing design. And her method, if you have not used or not read about the action mapping, should be day one. I think in every organization as a learning and workshop event. Because I say workshop because it's more about the doing part than the learning part. Kathy has a book, Map It. Finally, she put everything together that she was writing and blogging about for years. I would say she's not she's not a cheap person. Kathy is expensive compared to other books, but this is when the value and the I think the expense kind of balances out. She's amazing to get down to performance, business, and actions rather than the content, the presentation, and a whole type of thing. It's
Wow.
not a book that you read end to end. Again, it's one of those books that you start, apply, move on, come back, apply. And if nothing else, this is going to actually change how you do things, not what you think or what you know, but how you do things.
Wow. Excellent.
So a little bit of a change. Shannon Tipton, if you know Shannon in person, then you know the book. She is the main chief rebel, as she calls herself. When I read this book, I was still working for Comcast, huge organization, 90,000 people, lots of layers. And I read this book and I said, finally, someone put together these thoughts that everybody has about rebels and rebelling against the traditions that we know not working. And what else can we do? Some kind of a no nonsense way of changing how we behave as an organization and learning. So she's a good one to read that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And then just closing this part with obviously Jane Bothart. If you don't know her, you probably never been on social media because she's out there. She's amazing. And again, this is more about sharing your work, not just consuming a lot of information and learning, but how do you get out there? What are the steps and what are the value of sharing things that you do, like the e-learning heroes for Articulate. Just get out there, put your stuff out there, get feedback, get better, and just put stuff out there and let others people think of not just what you did, but how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, I think, a good list about the learning part.
Let me ask you this real quick. When you call it learning and doing business, is there a reason? What's this? Can you explain that a little bit? Why is the and doing business part?
Because I think the learning and the business should be and will be, and now we call this like learning in the flow or whatever the latest fad's going to come out in titles. But learning used to be this place that you go, whether it's called LMS or whatever you're using it, and then you learn something, you come back, and miraculously you're gonna use that somewhere else in your work.
Mm-hmm.
And today is very different. And this is how my book kind of structured to give you 6 different traits that I think now in the near future you'll need outside of your normal learning thing, just to survive and just to thrive in the new change. And one thing is that you need to get closer to the business. You need to think about how the application is going to happen, work outside your L&D bubble and all kinds of things. So I added this like and doing business, especially for Kathy Moore, who is focusing on the end result all the time and not just the learning theory part.
I see. Okay. Excellent.
So at the same time, I want to see nobody won yet, the 3-letter musical group, which I'm not surprised. So I'll give you a little bit of and ABBA is not 3 letters, but getting close. I'll give you a little bit more clue about it. This group had probably a one-time hit in the 90s, late 90s. And it is English, so you probably maybe have heard of it. Made it to America too, on the radio stations. So not as an LP or a disc, but radio stations is all over.
Okay, so that's a big clue. It's not an American band then.
It's not an American band. Yes.
3
3 letters. Okay, we'll get a little bit more. So and it's far away actually. AOB, Ace of Base. It's far away from here. I would say far away.
Mhm.
All right, so we'll get to that. So that was my learning section, part of the book. Now, if you when you win my book and you read my book, these are all somewhere show up throughout the story. So my book is not an L&D book, and this is why I didn't even put it on the list. It's not an L&D book that you go and learn something and then you're happy about it. It's more a story in my life, like learning and lifelong learning, and all the stories that I went through, and hopefully share it with you. You learn something and you can apply. So there's a storytelling around it. But I did go in and use all these books as a starting point.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit of the design part. This is less about designing courses per se, but designing either experiences or designing solutions. Because sometimes a course is not actually a solution that you should start out with. There is a problem, and you try to find the solution for that. So design thinking has been out there for a long time now. There's big pros and cons, and people who bash it, people who can't live without it. It's more than post-it notes. That's the picture that you always see, that lots of post-it notes and design thinking. So I wanted to make sure that I read everything that I could. I've been using design thinking with my team and solving problems, but translated into our L&D. So kind of like change it a little of how we work in reality. Because I don't know how you guys work, but you never have all the right stakeholders in a room who can make decisions. You never have those resources that you need and all that type of thing. That's not the level that we probably operate. So I wanted to see that how it works in theory and how we can apply that in our lives. So design, there's a lot about design thinking in this part, because it is a little bit of a psychology part of it, and a little bit about the application part of it. And then I accidentally end up to this how to build and well-lived your joyful life kind of thing. It sounds like a self-help thing, and it kind of does. So what they did is, it's an interesting thing, a light reading of how do you take the design thinking approach from work and apply it to your own life. And it's a little bit of a eye-opening things of how focused we are sometimes on the tool in front of us rather than the goal that we try to achieve. And there's, once you step back, there's another ways to get there, that type of thing. So that would be a good one to read.
Interesting. Is there any in that list of 5? Is there one in particular that you think is a standout?
So if you want to know more about design thinking itself, the first one, the Design Thinking Innovation Trend Series, I think it's a good introduction, good examples, and well written. If you want to think about more of the psychology behind it, then the last one as a designing for behavior change. So if your goal is, in Kathy Moore's terms, there's all these obstacles or obstacles between you and your goal, and there are different ones, and one of them is motivation. We often run into that in training, that they need training because they don't do X. The problem with that is that if they're not motivated to do X, you can create all the training in the world, you're not going to move them. So this is more about, if the behavior change is the target, what other ways you can apply and work. It's more like a psychology around it. It's an interesting book.
Love it. Excellent.
Let me see. We're getting close. ABC. I don't know what him is. I need a I need a little more clue about it. So this is a guy, at least the front end person for this group, a guy who had probably a one-hit wonder. He's not really singing. Apparently, he cannot sing. It's kind of like a rap in between rapping and singing. And if you look at the YouTube video, when the chorus comes in and there's a woman too, his voice is actually down because he cannot sing. So you can hear the choir, the voice, and all over except his voice because he cannot sing. And yet he made it all over the world. There's this one time when he.
Wow, this is a good one. I'm
And then the last clue, which maybe if you've seen the clip, it might help. The clip itself is very simple. They're driving on the highway in a Chevy Impala, 3-person.
Wow. Okay.
And it's actually in the lyrics, singing about driving up the highway with the Chevy Impala.
Okay, I can hear people typing in Google right now.
Not B-52, no.
I love some of these guesses. Before we move on from the designing side, I wanted to mention real quick. So some of you may have seen my message on Slack in TLD chat. If you haven't, just jump in there on tldchat.com. I think I have it, the domain, and it'll push you into the Slack group. But I do have this book to share, which is Slideology by Nancy Duarte. And I'm probably going to just start a channel in our Slack work group for sharing books. And if you're interested in this one, reply to my post that's in the general channel for now, and we'll see how that works. It might be a few of you might want to jump into it, but let me know, because I actually have this one that's just been sitting on my bookshelf waiting for someone to appreciate it. All right, and let's get back into this list.
So in the meantime, Kara actually figured it out. It's OMC, and you might never ever remember OMC as 3 letters. Kara has like 2 of my books already, like literally 2 pieces of my book. So I don't know if you want another one, but I can send it. So here's what the little story about OMC is, and actually the book is going to come up at the bottom. If you actually can scroll down all the way to a little more, it's in the last section here, and it's about how bizarre. There's somewhere it says how bizarre. So if you don't remember any of the song, just remember how bizarre. Yes. And this guy just talking about how bizarre. The whole song is bizarre. And I don't know how, but I ended up reading this book because when you talk about chance and is it not on it? It should be. If not, then I'll put it in the chat. So some of my book mentions gamification, games, and all these elements that makes interesting your course or your design. And one of them is a chance. Chance is always exciting. And so after this, stay with us. But after this, you can Google OMC How Bizarre and watch the clip. So this guy driving his Chevy Impala, it's his own car, and he wrote a song about it. And there's this woman who's also a singer, and behind them is Brother Pele. It's in the song that back sitting Brother Pele, and he's driving the highway, blah blah blah. But the chance thing about his interesting story is that there is an actual Brother Pele. He couldn't make the shooting, but they didn't have more money to postpone, so they needed a Brother Pele. And they were in the studio figuring out like who else could be Brother Pele. And this guy from the Philippines knocked on the door and says, "I'm walking around here. Is there any job that I can do for you?" And it's like, you know what? Here's a shirt. Here's some glasses. You're gonna be Brother Pele. Sit in the car and just play along. This guy had no idea what they're doing, no idea that it's going to be millions of views on YouTube. So when you watch the video, he's sitting back and enjoying the music, he has no idea what's going on. And he ended up in the video clip. So it's like the chance of 1 in a million that you knock on the door, "Hey, do you have any work for me?" And then they put it into a video clip that millions are watching.
What a great story. Why do you know this? I'm just kind of curious.
Because I read the book.
Oh, okay.
So there's this guy behind this book who was the I think he was the sound manager for OMC. Mm-hmm. And it's about this guy, the singer, of how he goes through this process of doing over and over again. He's a jerk, kind of thing. He's very simple. He can't sing, but he has this idea, his vision that he's gonna have this song, and it just goes over and over again. And at some point, it gets a big hit, and he just goes on this tour and sings his song, this one little song that went all over. So interesting, how bizarre.
Yeah, and that's what Kara says. You know, that's called Zsolt bizarre.
And it was I mean, so the bizarre, actually, how I got to the book was I looked up bizarre, just the word itself, because writing a book is a bizarre experience. It's you have this vision and you're excited about it and you start writing, and then you get to the point like, nobody's gonna read this. It sucks. Why am I wasting my time with this kind of thing? And it's a cycle of over and over again. I have to go and rewrite what I wrote already and all that. So at some point you need to get to the point like, I'm gonna have to finish this and put it out there, and maybe somebody reads it. So my goal was with this book to have one person in the whole world that I don't know buys my book. That was the goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it did happen. An ATD Technology, somebody bought and had the signing ceremony and whatever. I took a picture like, you are the person that I wrote this book for.
That is great. That's another good story. All right. So you want to get into this thinking category?
Yeah, so this one is less action-oriented category. It's more about how the world works, how we think, how our brain looks at or reviews our world, how it translates, and a lot of things that we think taking for granted, but it's not really the way that it works. So in this one, one thing is critical thinking. It's the second from the bottom. Critical thinking, tools for taking charge, professional and personal life. Critical thinking is one of my 6 traits that I think it is and will be even more important for everybody, and especially for learning and development professionals. This is not about criticizing people or us. It's about how we look at the world and analyze what we see, why we see, and then there are levels to that. This ability, critical thinking made it to the top 10 skills now. They usually post this like in 2020, 2040, etc. And as simple as identifying why people trying to do something, or why people saying things the way they say. And it starts out in my book to give you a little bit of exercise of just end of the day for 5 minutes before you start working, just think about it, have one decision, think about one decision, pick a decision that you made, and think about what made you make that decision. What did you feel about the decision? What was playing around, why exactly that decision was made, how you feel about it, what were the circumstances, the factors, that type of thing. So that you can do it just once a day. And what it helps you with is getting into this mood of separating your personal views, your personal reactions, to almost like stepping out from yourself and look at what you did and how you did it from a third person perspective, and analyze what makes you do things the way you do. Mm-hmm. Once you know about yourself, then you can apply it to others. And this is where you don't get into conversations that you see on politics or media, that there are 2 people just shouting at each other because they're on different levels of critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And to translate that into a simple L&D problem, when you work with a subject matter expert and he says, I have 70 slides and they're all important, we should put them into the learning. If you say, well, we can't put 70 slides into the training, what they hear is that their content is not important. So this is the level of, you need to understand their thinking and decoupling the 2. There's the content and there's the importance. And so now you can think about it from your perspective. Say, yes, it's very important. So your question could be, if this is so important, it must exist somewhere else, right? It's like, oh yeah, we have this intranet too, and we have that, and then you can go in a conversation. So now you're on the same track of, okay, if it's important and it's already there, why don't we use that and drive people there? Then everyday use anyway, and don't duplicate the content. Well, that may be a good idea. So you move from I'm attacking you because you have so much content and it's not important, to I agree with you, let's make the best for the learner how to get to your content, which is important. So those are the things that come out from this critical thinking and how we can think about that. So that's
Right.
I very definitely recommend for people.
Yeah, I would say, since I have an English degree, and that is probably the one thing that I took away from college, that like the most valuable skill I probably learned was the critical thinking and literary analysis. It's just been so incredibly useful for me, especially with the amount of information we just take in on a regular basis. You
Yeah.
need to have that critical thinking skill to be able to like sort through this stuff. Otherwise, you're essentially getting, I think, victimized on a day-to-day basis if you're unable to process this stuff correctly. So totally agree. Love that recommendation.
And then in this group, we cannot move on besides without talking about thinking fast and slow. I think Daniel Kahneman is a phenomenal author, and if you haven't read this book, probably you should drop everything and do it now. It's mind blowing, literally, of what you read in the book about how our mind works, or how our mind might work. But just examples of what he's bringing up, and ways to look at what humans do with their mind, it completely changes, I think, your not just your view of life, but generally how you approach things anymore. At least for me, it was one of the books that everybody was talking about. I read it late in the game, and now I know why they were talking about it. If you do read that book, there is one chapter in it, just as a pre-warning, it's called the primer chapter. And priming is things that your brain unconsciously kind of observes and you don't know. So it's unconsciously kind of primes you to do something and you're not aware of it. They Coca-Cola and all that, using those in ads. You don't see the slide because it's so fast, but unconsciously it gets into your brain and then you drink Coca-Cola, whatever those things are. So there are examples in those research about crazy things. Like you might have heard about this pencil thing. If you put the pencil here, like somehow, and it makes you smile, because that's the only way to hold it between your nose and your mouth and your lips, that actually creates a reaction, and now you're happy and smiling. So kind of like a back and forth thing. Another crazy thing was there about a study in Florida, when people were in a room, they read words, random words, and then they had to move and walk into the next room for the next activity. But what they measured was based on the words. One of group got about words about old and sluggish and lazy and that type of thing. Other was energetic and new and fresh. They measured how fast they go from one place to another, just by reading those words as a primer. And so all these things are mind-blowing examples. But what I want to say is that they're not true. So when you read them, also Google priming effect. And even Daniel Kahneman came back and said that some of these research afterwards was not replicable. So there's this replicability index of redoing and trying to replicate the result. So some of them are not. So priming is still there, but not as prominent as it's in the book.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
So before you start blogging and sharing that Twitter because you got to that part of the book, Google it.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So finally, the playing part, because there's nothing else more important than playing in our profession, and I cannot write a book without that part. So in this game, it's a mixture of video games and designing games and creating games and thinking about it. Two things here that's definitely on the list is Play to Learn. This is from Carl Kopp and Sharon Bowler. They have a workshop, ATD workshop, when you actually go in and design a game in a day and a half. Just the prototype, actually prototype, but you play and have a play through that. And based on that they created the book. So if you're interested in using any of the game elements or designing and don't want to embarrass yourself with your first project, read this book first. It gets you through the elements and how you approach that, the play testing, the design elements, the type of things that you can put into learning. It's focused on learning. And so at the end, you come out a lot more, I think, less vulnerable to your organization than if you just build a game and says like, hey, here's your new sales training. So that's a definite one for anybody interested in games. And then the other one is very different. It's Game Thinking by Amy Jo Kim. If you don't know Amy Jo Kim, you probably know her by her work in The Sims, in the GarageBand, and some of the social games back in the early 2000s. So she was behind a lot of social type of learning. They were the ones who created the GarageBand, the first ever actual physical guitar that you played, and it was an exhibition nearby in Philadelphia when they actually showed the first prototype of that. So she started out as a game designer, but focused on the social aspect of it. This book is more about development, product development, anything around using game thinking, those elements that she worked with and was successful, and translate that into product. What is the right way to bring out a new product to the market? And learning is a product, or the whole process could be mapped to her theory. So that's a little bit of a different take on learning. It's more about the doing and creating part, but has and actually a whole chapter just around the learning part of it.
Excellent. Wow. Okay.
And she's a good person too.
Nice. So let's see. I know that you have a hard stop coming up soon. We've let's see. It's quarter till at this point right now. Did you want to go through maybe just another couple recommendations to the next group?
Yeah. So just quickly, the futuring is not a word. I think I just made it up there, but it's about what's coming. The second machine age. When I wrote this 2 years ago, probably most of the things are not future anymore, but present. But if you want to read something, two of them, the first one, The Work, Progress, and Prosperity in Time of Brilliant Technologies. It's an amazing book about what AI is doing and bringing, and how does it affect you. And then from the learning perspective, Brandon Carson's book of Learning in the Age of Immediacy just goes into details of all the things that's changing around us. And if you don't move, try to do the old traditional way of working and learning, it's going to be a very hard couple of years and decades for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And then debating is a catch-all. It is like things that kind of didn't get into any of the others or overlap things. I think one thing that we all want is, being successful, and then there's a lot of motivational books here. It is, Frame of Mind from Howard Gardner about the theory of multiple intelligences, which is not learning styles. So don't mix the two. Actually, Howard Gardner came out in a statement and said, like, don't use my stuff as learning styles because it's very different, and don't get into the myth part of learning. So that's a very good one to learn. Emotional intelligence, just a good, I think, way of learning about it. And then if I have to call out one thing, is Kelly McGonigal's book, The Willpower Instinct. So if there's a twin sisters in the world that was most influential on my career and just what I read, it's the McGonagalls. Kelly McGonigal and Jane McGonigal. Jane McGonigal is a futurist game designer. Amazing story if you Google her. She was really on her deathbed because she hit her head and literally was sentenced to bed. Like the doctor said, you cannot move, you cannot read, you cannot do anything. You just have to sit. And then he made up her own game of how to survive, and that's how he started working on these elements of self-help. So that's one thing. And Kelly, her twin sister, she works as a psychologist, and she's talking about willpower and how we can use willpower to make things, and it's not how actually normal people think about willpower. So it was two amazing women.
Wow. That sounds very, very cool. I am actually going to collect all this stuff, and like I feel really privileged that we're able to kind of distill this list into this smaller list that I'll be able to post as like show notes, and I'll have that reference and I'll post it in social media and make sure that we send it out in the newsletter so you guys can check it out. I'll try to include a link to the YouTube video of how
bizarre.
OMC. But this has been absolutely fantastic, Zsolt. I'm so grateful for you for coming on today. Thank you so much. This has been really, really useful. I'll have this in podcast format too for people to listen to, and it makes for a great Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and everybody who's on the call. And let me just share my passion, because as you see, I'm really passionate about these things, and I could talk probably all day.
Yeah. So how about maybe if you could just drop like your contact information into chat where people can follow you. Definitely connect with Zsolt on LinkedIn if you can. And anyway, everybody, if you have any book recommendations, anything, you can post it here and I'll put them in the show notes. And also tldchat.us, that'll drive you over to the Slack work group we have. Jump in there and make some recommendations. And don't forget, I do have this book, Slideology, that I am willing to share with somebody. And then that one's going, and buy Zsolt's book. We'll have some links to that as well. And everybody have an excellent weekend. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.